just they add a different element, to my persona. And, I feel like sometimes people, they stare into my soul, and this kind of blocks them out. It blocks out the soul staring lunatics out there that just look too deep. And these defend me from those people.
They're also great for hangovers. So multi-purpose.
Oh, yeah. Oh, phenomenal. Oh, I'm excited for the show sheet we actually have.
Me too. I wrote a ton.
I see that.
I had a lot of feelings on these people.
I'm glad I took a brief look at the show sheet because I pulled up the one from last week instead of this week. So I'm glad I did that. Oh, man. Yes. Oh, yes, we have. We have some good notes from you. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and share this stuff on Twitter, of course. Get everything up and running.
Yeah, my husband's still out on a route, so I promised him I would send him the link so he could listen to it while he's running the route. Poor thing.
Let's check this out because I didn't get a notification. Oh, great. I didn't do the right thing. Hey, I'm going to go ahead. No, we can roll with this. I'll just go ahead and tag it in there and share this. And we'll be good to go. All right. Yeah, we'll just roll with this. I didn't put the right thing in for Twitter, so it's all good.
Oh, gotcha.
Figured out. It's all good. All right. You ready to kick off the show?
Yep, let's go.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Fantasy Intervention. Coming at you hard this week because we got waivers to talk about. And I mean, honestly, there were so many different people putting out different pickups, all sorts of nonsense out there. We wanted to make sure we protected you. We wanted to make sure that you made the right pickups because sometimes you just see all these names up there and you're like, why would you waste money on that person? How deep is your league? What is going on in the head of the person that's putting this out? So we have a bunch of people that, are obvious pickups, of course. We have a bunch of people who we want to blow these pickups off and we don't want anything to do with them. And then we have some gems that we'll discuss in the latter half of the episode. But it's not just me. It's not just me in these phenomenal shades. I am joined by, of course, Britt Flynn. What's going on, Britt? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Just excited. We talked about this pretty much all day and how excited we were. Last week we crushed it and we actually beat a bunch of people to the waivers. So that kind of amped me up. I was pretty excited about that. I'm just ready to get this episode kicked off. I'm ready.
Yeah, let's go. Let's dive right in. It's the first week of buys, which is the latest week that bye weeks have happened in a really long time. And the buys go deeper than they have been ever. So there's lots to chew on here today.
Yeah, I know. I think that the biggest thing that we were trying to do with this show or this episode was trying to get ahead of that week 7 bye, because that week 7 bye is absolutely nasty. It's nasty for fantasy football all over the place. So we definitely have some insight on that. But let's go ahead and kick off something because I was deciding whether to put this in no shit, you should definitely pick this guy up. This is an obvious pickup, or maybe you should actually fade this guy. And that's Devontae Booker. So I'm going to let you take this over while I go ahead and share some things on Facebook and take care of all that stuff. I want to hear your thoughts on Devontae Booker because I am torn whether I want to drop, anybody on my team and try and roster this guy that might have the volume, but might not have the efficiency necessary to be relevant.
Well, first, it worries me really that everybody literally almost everyone on that New York Giants team is injured. Second off, it really worries me about his efficiency. Looking at what he did up against Dallas, I think that his fantasy value is greatly inflated because he did score those 2 touchdowns. But if you actually look at how many carries he had, he was only averaging 2.6 yards per carry on his rush attempts. New York is 24th in the league in the amount of rush attempts per game. They're always playing from behind. They'll definitely be playing more from behind this week I don't think Daniel Jones is going to be back. I really don't. Probably for 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, he looked like he didn't know where he was.
Yeah, he got his bell rung. He got his bell rung for sure. Like that was not. That was not.
It was awful. Jeff Mann said something yesterday. Like, did anybody see that? He was foaming at the mouth. Like, yes, he was. My friend and I were watching it. We're like, he's drooling on himself. He literally had no idea where he was. So he's going to be out for a while. The only thing, if he does perform well this week, it'll be just because of the receptions and not because of his pure rush attempts. He's going against the Rams, Carolina, Kansas City, and maybe Vegas if Saquon isn't back. The Rams against the running backs are really good against the pure runners, but then they do have that little gap in the pass catching running back. So that'll be his only saving grace, but I just can't trust him with all the other injuries on New York.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Devontae Booker is like he's always been like this guy who just ruins fantasy lives. Like no matter what team he's been on, he's just there to make the other running backs irrelevant. And then when he gets an opportunity, he normally doesn't do anything with it. But I'm on playerprofiler.com right now, and I'm looking at the evaded tackles, right? As a backup, he has 6.8 per game. 27 overall, that's 11th. His juke rate is a 93.1%. I mean, obviously it's a limited sample size, but I mean, that's the best in the league by a very wide margin. Yards created, not that much off of his evaded tackles and juke rate. He's only creating about 20 yards per game. So I don't know that the efficiency will be there. And for me, I'm actually going to end up fading him like we talked about. So he is not an obvious pickup. I think my camera is fading. He's obviously he's not an obvious pickup, and he's somebody that I'm actually going to be questioning moving forward. If I wanted to throw some FAAB at him, let's just say I throw 10% of my FAAB at him, you end up getting a guy that has great volume, I'll roll with that and I'll pick that up all day. But do I want to go out there and blow the rest of my remaining FAAB when there's still going to be other running backs and other players that actually get opportunities? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and save as much as I possibly can as we go down to the stretch. We're starting to make a chance to playoffs. So maybe you're 0-5 and you need to make something crazy happen. Sure, this could be that dart throw, especially if you don't have any running backs. Maybe you start out the season with, like a J.K. Dobbins type player and you're Cam Akers maybe, and you're just desperate for running backs. Sure. But there will be more opportunities. There will be more injuries. This is a long season and we're just starting it out. I'm going to be out myself on Devontae Booker, but I'll throw 10% on him just to see if I can get a volume guy on my roster. All right. So hopping on to the next one. Who do we have up next? We'll start with the quarterbacks. Teddy B. Right? This should be an obvious pickup for me. Sorry for moving the camera around, everybody. I'm trying to make sure I look all pretty. Obviously, the camera is afraid to capture these beautiful sunglasses on my face. But no, Teddy B, right? He's under 20% of leagues. 18 plus points in 3 out of the 4 healthy matchups that he's actually finished the game in. He looks good. He looks good behind quarterback. He's fine in his receivers. Tim Patrick's great. We have Cortland Sutton, who he's kind of hit or miss, but he's still provided Teddy Bridgewater with plenty of opportunity, to actually have some of these big games. Meanwhile, Noah Fant, great option for him, and Jerry Jeudy's coming back. So we should see some of these weapons actually come to assist him in being relevant and make plays. And honestly, I think Teddy Bridgewater, if you're looking to stream a quarterback, he's not, he's not in a bad spot. How are you feeling about Teddy B?
I mean, he's not going to blow the doors off anything. He's going to provide pretty much the same, just basic floor every week. But he is kind of going into a favorable stretch of matchups. He plays the Raiders next week. They're allowing 17 fantasy point per game to opposing quarterbacks, which is pretty much where his floor has been. But what's kind of intriguing to me is that they're allowing 15 to the tight end position. So I think that opportunity to work with Fant is just really, really juicy. And there aren't that many great quarterbacks out there after the injuries and the first week of buys. I mean, we have slim pickings out here on this waiver wire, so beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, true story. I mean, I do want to go back real quick because we do have people that are commenting in the chat talking about Barkley's ankles. It's something that's where, like, yeah, he could be gone for a week. I doubt it's that short. I'm thinking 2-week minimum.
No, they put him on IR today, I'm pretty sure. So
did he
he's
end up making
on
it
3.
Yeah,
I think so.
Either way, they're going to end up protecting their investment and their guy. And I was going to say he's probably going to be out closer to 4 weeks. So that would make perfect sense if he did end up going to IR, if he did end up making it there. But either way, like, you're still going to get production out of Devontae Booker, even if, let's just hypothetically say that Saquon did not end up on IR, and you can confirm or deny this as I'm trying to buy you time to look this up. But you're still going to end up having Devontae be a bigger part of this offense than what we saw before, because they're not going to keep on throwing Barkley out there to the Wolves and hope that he doesn't get hurt after, he's been at a higher level investment for them. This is part of their future. This is part of their organization. They don't want to ruin that. So I think that Devontae Booker will still be relevant regardless of the case. Even after the 4 weeks that he comes back, I think they're going to give him time to heal up and to get his legs underneath him. All right, so let's go on to...
I was just going to say they didn't actually put him on IR, but they are calling it probably at least a 2-week injury.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. 3 to 4 weeks minimum. 4 weeks is probably where I've seen it, where I've talked to the injury experts. That's where they believe he'll end up. Seeing a full workload probably closer to 5 weeks out. So Devontae Booker is still going to have relevance. All right. As for Heinicke, he's 18.3% owned. And I mean, this is one of those no shits. Yeah, you should probably pick up Heinicke. I know he had a rough week this past week. It was not great. It was actually extremely ugly up against a somewhat poor Saints defense in the secondary. But, they have Kansas City. They have Green Bay. And Fitz is still going to be out for a few more weeks. They're saying week 7, week 8 is most likely going to be his return. But Heinicke offers you that rushing upside. The Chiefs' defense has struggled. The Green Bay defense, the Green Bay secondary is beat up. I think this is something where you could actually pick up Heinicke and stream him over the next 2 weeks, and he's worth a little bit of FAAB. Now, 5%, sure, in quarterback leagues, like max. But he still is worth throwing a few bucks at and starting over the next 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on Heinicke?
Yeah, Kansas City actually surpassed Washington as the worst defense in the league against opposing quarterbacks after their matchup on Sunday night. They're allowing 308.6 yards a game to the position and 47.2 rush yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. I think Heinicke's a great filler for the next 2 weeks. Plus, week 7 is going to be brutal. It's what you mentioned at the beginning of this show. We need to get ahead of this so that we're not left with just nothing. So we have so many people, like actual top 10 studs out in week 7. So grab him this week, even if you don't have to play him because you do have a stud, stash him on your bench for next week so that somebody else in your league doesn't go out and get him.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 5 starting quarterbacks out in week 7, arguably 5. You have Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, and then arguably like Trevor Lawrence. Big Ben is still rostered in a significant amount of leagues. Like that's a little bit rough, and getting ahead of that is going to be crucial to making sure that you actually win week 7, which is a pivotal week for a lot of teams who are looking at 500 or so records. As for the running back position, it's AJ Dillon's season, baby. Like, he's finally getting workloads, and I know he's 61%, so he technically doesn't count, but I want to give a huge shout out because I've been pumping AJ Dillon all off season, and he's finally starting to get that shared workload. But yeah, I mean, you brought up like in the notes, yeah, he shouldn't even be mentioned. He should be rostered, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's go ahead and hop over to Marlon Mack. Right, Marlon Mack, like I've been shouting about this for weeks now, how he is a trade candidate. And he has an opportunity to go somewhere else where their injuries have happened. I mean, we could talk about the Giants being trade candidates for Marlon Mack, or the Chiefs, which is the number 1 right now. I mean, CEH just went on to IR. Marlon Mack should be a target for multiple different teams. I mean, the Ravens pretty much hoarded every possible, decent backup that was on the free agent market. So, I mean, who else are going to go to? Like, Duke Johnson's getting workouts and stuff. But outside of that, like, there's really nobody out there. Marlon Mack for a late round pick is pretty enticing for a team like the Chiefs or a team like the Giants. And I think that he could be fantasy relevant. He's still shown some of the explosiveness and whatnot. And although he is coming back from his Achilles, yeah, sure, he's not going to get a ton of touches up against Jonathan Taylor and Naeem Hines. but he still is good enough to where he's actually working in those touches, here and there and getting some play behind those two studs. Marlon Mack, is he a waiver wire pickup for you this week?
I think so, absolutely. The past 2 weeks, the Colts have basically used him as, hey, here's what he can do. Look, his Achilles is fine. I think it was even Stephania Bell that mentioned something that the way that he's looked, how explosive he's looked coming back from that Achilles is a great sign for Cam Akers coming back. He only played in 14% of the snaps last night, but he put up 47 yards on 5 carries. So he had a 9.7 yard per carry average. I mean, that's explosive, especially coming off an Achilles. So, and with all these other running back injuries that have happened, a lot of these teams have draft capital that they can give up for him. Stash him. He's going to go somewhere.
No, I'm excited for Marlon Mack. I'm trying to grab him everywhere that I can. I picked him up last week because I talked about it last week. I just thought we wanted to revisit that topic because it is so crucial and could actually be somewhat of a league winner, or at least a upside flex play for a lot of these teams moving forward. And, if there are complications to guys like CEH with his rib injury and whatnot, and does take him a little bit more time. I mean, we're talking about a guy that can buy you 3, 4, 5 wins over the next 5 or 6 weeks. I love Marlon Mack. Darrell Williams, right, is on the Chiefs already, and he's somebody that I think it's no shit like he should be picked up. Do you have anything to add about Darrell Williams, or is that just a no-brainer?
I think after they put CEH on IR, this morning they were being a little bit shifty about the extent of his injury, but this afternoon when the news finally did break that he was on IR, the same kind of thing happened last year. He got hurt and then tried to come back too early and then got hurt again. I don't think they're going to rush him back too quickly this season. I think they're actually going to let him heal up. And Darrell Williams is the first in line to be the main workhorse back in Kansas City. The only thing that I'm a little bit hesitant about Darrell Williams is that the Chiefs defense has been so bad that they've been playing from behind and their pass game has kind of overtaken the run game. But other than that, yes, you should pick up Darrell Williams.
All right. So let's go on to Khalil Herbert. 18 touches, 75 yards. Could end up receiving some more work up against the Packers, especially in the receiving game. Khalil Herbert, did he impress you enough to actually grab a roster spot and solidify that up until Montgomery comes back?
I think so. I think they're being a little bit cagey on Montgomery's injury as well, especially since the Bears have that week 10 bye. Normally, if they give you that 4 to 6 weeks or whatever, you take the long end of that when there's a bye week in the middle of it. I was going to say that Khalil Herbert was a big surprise to a lot of people, unless you listened to us last week, because we both talked about him last week. And I'm not sure if his usage was because Williams wasn't 100% or because it was just part of the game plan or whatever. But he looked good. He looked really, really good and explosive. And again, we're running into a really rough chunk of bye weeks. So I like him.
All right. And yeah, I'm in the same boat. We talked about it last week. Rondale Moore, been hollering about him for weeks. I don't think we need to talk about him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, because I was actually going to fade him and go with Tyrell Williams, but Tyrell Williams, dude, man, that's tough. They're saying that he's nowhere close to being back after a concussion that should have kept him out for one game. He's had concussion issues. Tyrell Williams might be looking at the end of his career, and then Quintez Cephas got hurt. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute smash for a pickup for me. Honestly, this could be my first time actually saying this about Amon-Ra St. Brown this season. He was widely unimpressive in 2020 in his final year in college. He sinks all the way to the 4th round after a lot of people had him going in the 3rd round. So, this is something as to where, finally he might actually see the volume that everybody's been hollering about since the draft, saying that he was going to be the top end guy. He might finally see it. And that's if Khalif Raymond doesn't end up taking it. But I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is actually a buy candidate this week. I'm thinking right around 15%, 10% of my FAAB in that range, depending on how much I have left and how much I need a receiver. You have anything to say about Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Well, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I did write about him right after the draft as part of my draft or rookie receiver breakout candidates. Goff loves to throw to the slot receiver. His ADOT, whatever, it just fits completely with with a slot receiver.
Yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown's overall snap count this season is at a 61.6% average, but he's played 61.4 of those snaps out of the slot. Going forward, especially with Cephas, like his long range threat gone, I'm expecting dink and dunk slot. I mean, pull the handle Vegas style. For
I mean, this was a big conversation, was how much Jared Goff loved Cooper Kupp, and how Cooper Kupp's metrics actually do compare with Amon-Ra St. Brown's, and they do play very similar type style of play. Although I think that Cooper Kupp is a lot more physical than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can see how people would make those comparisons. This is something where Jared Goff could finally start making eye contact with the guy in the slot more often and smashing that home. Now, what I'm hoping does not happen is the fact that they actually need more wide receivers, wide being the emphasis term over there, and pushing Amon-Ra St. Brown to the outside. I don't think he belongs there. I don't think he's going to do well over there. So he needs to stay in the slot for this to work. And if they end up going out and trying to force him the outside, it could end up being a waste of FAAB, but I'm going to take my shot on him for sure. I will hurry up and answer this question real quick. Hey guys, I was offered Chris Carson and Alex Collins for my waiver wire pickup. I thought it was weird, so I declined. Thoughts? I wouldn't have declined. I don't know anybody on the waivers. It depends on who's on your waivers, right? Like if you have a guy like Kadarius Toney on there, sure, that might be a little bit of an undersell. But Chris Carson, you wouldn't drop Chris Carson for anybody on waivers right now. You wouldn't drop Alex Collins if you had Chris Carson for anybody on waivers right now. So I would probably pull the trigger on that one personally. But weird things have happened, and there is no bad trade necessarily until you actually see that hindsight. I would have entered that one. All right, I do see we have questions in here from Robert, from Dustin, so I will end up getting to those, but let's go ahead and finish off this section because we have Tim Patrick, and Tim Patrick's available in 40% of leagues. I don't know how that happens. He should be picked up. His schedule is insane. Like, he's got Las Vegas, he's got Cleveland, he's got Washington, he's got Dallas, he's got Philly. I mean, that's great all the way up until their bye. And then they have a tough one with the Chargers, but then Kansas City after that. I mean, Tim Patrick should be rostered in almost every single league and started on most weeks, especially when you're looking up against Washington and Dallas and Philly for sure. I mean, it doesn't really make too much sense to me as to why he's out there. Do you have any idea why Tim Patrick's still out there?
I think the hype surrounding him after the KJ Hamler injury went down, and then he put up 3.4 points or something like that. It was just something very, very, very low, and people aren't patient enough with their waiver pickups. They want to pick somebody up and plug them in, and then if they don't return value immediately, then they just drop them and move on to the next thing. Same reason why AJ Dillon is out there in a lot of leagues, I think, to be honest. The only thing that I am a little bit worried about with him is that Jerry Jeudy could return as early as next week. Just temper how much you're willing to spend on him based on that information. And the Broncos signed John Brown to the practice squad today. And John Brown didn't get cut because he was bad. He got cut because he didn't want to be in that situation. So that's something to monitor as well. But if you want to throw a few dollars, a little bit of your FAAB at him, he's going to be worth it at least for a couple weeks.
Yeah, John Brown is interesting as well, actually. I was not aware of that, so thank you for informing me. All right, so we have the tight end situation. Hunter Henry was a smash play, and he's been getting more and more snaps every single week. I believe we talked about it last week as where he's starting to see more opportunities. Jonnu Smith is seeing a little bit less opportunities, and Hunter Henry's been taken advantage of. Now he's on the waivers, and it's like, why is this guy on the waivers who should have been rostered off the bat? I mean, this is a tight end New England offense with the rookie quarterbacks who, rookies not always, but some rookies will tend to actually target the tight end more often because they get open quicker, they're bigger targets, and they have mismatches. So Hunter Henry should have been picked up. I mean, anything to add on this one?
I just think the narrative around this whole double tight end situation is that, well, Jonnu got paid more. And so everyone thought at the beginning that Jonnu was going to be more valuable. But Henry's shown in the past couple weeks that he is the number one tight end in that system. Last week, he had 6 catches on 8 targets and a touchdown. Jonnu only had 2 catches on 2 targets. So just by that target share alone, I mean, he's also found the end zone in back-to-back games. He's facing Dallas next week. They're 31st in DVOA against the tight ends. I mean, it's a little skewed because of Gronk and missing Keanu Neal that game, but I mean, Dallas is still pretty bad against the tight ends. And if they are going to succeed against Dallas, New England has to throw to their tight ends a la Hunter Henry.
Yep. I mean, yeah. Once again, this is like one of those no shit things where it's like, yeah, like Ricky Seals-Jones. That's another one. Dan Arnold after that. Is there any other things that you want to bring up from these two before we hop on to the guys that we don't want anything to do with? We don't understand why they're being brought up in the waiver wire conversation.
I think we should go ahead to the avoid because there's a lot of things that I have to say about a lot of these avoid candidates.
All right, so let's go ahead and hop onto the void after this. Robert asks, what do you guys think about picking up Jeff Wilson Jr.? He's actually going to be in one of my gems section, so I'll go into more detail about that. But yes, I do think you should pick him up. And Dustin asks, let's see, entered a $20 league and some early drafting practice on Yahoo Sports. He was going against Commissioner, and I had Andrews and Lamar, and he had Taylor. I came back and won. Oh, Dustin's just telling a story. I was looking for the question in this, and I just thought I was missing it. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and hop onto this void. And the void section is the thing that actually gets my blood pumping here, because this is what we're here for. We're here to make sure that you guys don't waste your waiver wire FAAB and to find the guys that are actually almost like roster traps, right? They get on your roster, they end up wasting all of your FAAB, and then you come back and you're like, why the fuck did I pick him up? I wasted all my money. And then he ends up giving you zeros or giving you low scoring points that you could have actually had a guy at the position that would have given you much more advantage at your roster. So let's go ahead and start out with quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, he has Miami. Miami's been subpar. But after that, they got a bye, and then they got Seattle without Russell Wilson, and then they got Buffalo. So the reason why I bring up Seattle without Russell Wilson is because Geno Smith, sure, he had a great game in the second half when the defense wasn't prepared for him. But Geno Smith is not a good quarterback. There's a reason why he's been a career backup this entire time. So, Seattle up against Jacksonville might be a little bit more competitive than what we're thinking it's going to be, which means that Trevor Lawrence won't have to pass as much, and James Robinson can be more involved in the offense. Buffalo has great defense, especially when it comes to their edge rushers. Sure, they've had a couple games where they're porous up against the quarterback, but I still would not want to start Trevor Lawrence up against them, even if he does have to pass, because we're talking about sacks and turnovers. I mean, he could end up having 3 interceptions this game with 5 sacks, and all of a sudden you're looking at a very marginal upside week from Trevor Lawrence. This is something where, I think it's the perfect opportunity to allow Trevor Lawrence to get picked up by another team, by another managing squad, and have him just be a roster clog, because nobody's going to want to drop him. They're going to see Seattle, right, with that positive score, and they're going to be like, oh, I can't wait to play him. And then if they do play him, it could be a trap. If they don't play him, then all of a sudden he's still taking up a roster spot. Then you talk about Buffalo. I mean, it's just time and time again where all of a sudden you're 3 out of 4 weeks where you cannot play Trevor Lawrence. Let somebody else pick up this roster clog. What are your thoughts on it?
I think if you're in a league that does waiver priority and not FAAB, and you've got a decent waiver priority, then go ahead and try. He had a pretty decent outing against the Titans, and the Miami matchup's pretty enticing. They've allowed 22 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, and they've also been pretty bad against the run. Lawrence does have a rushing touchdown in each of his past 2 games, so I do think if you can't get one of these other, I don't want to say good options, because there really aren't any great options at the moment out on waivers with the bye weeks. But if you can't get one of them, I don't think it would hurt taking Trevor Lawrence and playing him this week. But I wouldn't spend any FAAB on him if you are in a FAAB-based waiver league. Yeah.
So, I mean, and if you're not in a FAAB-based waiver league, then typically you don't want to end up wasting something on streaming quarterbacks, because there's so many quarterbacks out there. And I'm assuming you're playing a 1 quarterback league if you're not playing with FAAB. So, I mean, you literally could have the pickings of any other quarterback, so you don't want to waste that on him. But wait till he makes it free agency, and then you can pick him up. But don't go waste money on him. All right, we have Big Ben, and 22.8%. And I don't know, I'm sitting there, I get on 3 different sites today, and I'm seeing, doing my report or my research for this episode, and I'm seeing 3 different sites have Big Ben up there, and I'm like,
it was insane.
What? I mean, I'm saying don't chase the points, right? But I'm saying that
what points?
Pretty much half-assed, because I mean, he had his best week of the season, putting up 16 points. I don't understand it. I don't get where it's coming from. He lost his, was arguably his best receiver with Juju Smith-Schuster, and the love of his life, of course. is now out of the picture. Now he actually has to throw it downfield a little bit, probably more often than he wants to. I don't I don't get it. I mean, we could see this game turn into a run-heavy contest because Seattle, who, they have up next, right? This game could end up turning into a run-heavy contest where Najee Harris just runs the ball 20 plus times. He gets a few dump offs, of course, but he's touching the ball 25 times and they just run down the clock. And all of a sudden, at the end of the game, you're sitting there with Ben Roethlisberger having 7 possessions. And you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, why would you want to go pick him up? Even in a 2-quarterback league, I would not pick him up in a 2-quarterback league. Like, that is literally the definition of a roster bomb. Can you make any sense of this?
No, I'm completely in agreement with you. The only upside that I can really think of is that everybody is so high on Najee right now, thinking that Najee's going to score a couple passing touchdowns just from the check downs, But other than that, I mean, I don't really want to rely on Najee to score a touchdown. His value so far this season has come in those little targets and PPR points. Ben's downfield accuracy is dismal. And here's a little Easter egg for you. His passer rating of 78.9 is on pace for his worst since 2006 when it was 75.4.
Damn, that's crazy.
And he is number 26th in the league in deep ball completion. Like, I'm not going to rely on him to score me any points outside of a PPR format. Or, I mean, I just can't. It blows my mind.
Yeah, it's gross. I don't understand it. Another one I don't understand is Mike Glennon. Like, I mean, you're talking about a completely just hammered, Giants team that has injuries everywhere. Like, the one hope that you would have is that Saquon Barkley could actually get just some yards after the catch and provide you with a little bit of that upside, like you were talking about with Najee Harris. I mean, that's not there. Are you going after Mike Glennon even in 2-quarterback leagues? What's your thought process with Mike Glennon?
No, I don't want to touch it at all. Everyone on the Giants team's injured. We still don't know. Well, we definitely know that Galladay's out. We still don't know the status on Shepard and Slayton. That leaves only Kadarius Toney and Booker as like the top 2 offensive weapons on that team. Like, I just cannot touch that. And the Giants offensive line is pretty piss poor also. So I just can't. I can't.
Yeah, I'm out. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, Kadarius Toney is dangerous as hell, but my love for Kadarius Toney, obviously.
Oh yeah, but if he's the only one, if all 3 of those are out, just think about it. Like, he's going to get mobbed.
Oh, well, they're going to try and mob him. He's too quick to get mobbed, but they're going to try and mob him. And what is he responsible for 150 yards? That doesn't do it for Mike Glennon. I'm out on Mike Glennon 100%. As for the running back, Alex Collins, and so here's the deal, right? Alex Collins, I was all in on him last week. I was talking about how he needs to be picked up, like he should be in your lineups. But now, if he sat there for this past week and people saw what his floor could be, because I think that's what we saw this past week was what his floor was. We're talking about a guy who is probably going to be up there in pricing for waivers. Like, in order to actually get him, you're probably gonna have to put 20% down, 15% down. But he has Pittsburgh, which is brutal. New Orleans. Brutal. And Chris Carson could be back any time now. Like, he could play this upcoming week for all we know. They're being very, very secretive about the injury report. After that, they have the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is easy, but then they got a bye week. So, like, I just don't understand outside of the Jaguars where you're going to get your value back for the FAAB that you spent on Alex Collins. I'm just out on him. Like, is this something where you'd be willing to throw any FAAB on Collins if he's out there, or are you staying clear away?
No, I picked him up a couple weeks ago just because Carson is injured quite a bit. But they said today there was an article that said Chris Carson takes a, quote, positive turn with his neck injury. So who the hell knows what that means? Collins wasn't exactly efficient either. He only averaged 3.1 yards a carry. And Seattle is one of the least run-heavy teams in the league because they are playing from behind so much. They're 26th in rush attempts per game. So, yeah. I can't rely on him, especially with Wilson out. And, can't do it.
We got our next guy up right here, Rich Dustin. He's in the chat. This time he actually does have a question. Is Gio Bernard worth picking up? Because this was actually my next guy that I'm fading hard as hell. I mean, Philly, right? Like you need touchdowns from this guy first off in order to be relevant, or you need significant volume. And Gio Bernard's been playing like 20% of snaps and hasn't seen significant volume. Philly is 9th best team when it comes to the dose score, which is dump off containment efficiency. They don't allow pass catchers to put up a lot of work on them. And the Bucs should be up in this contest. Like I said, I need volume, not touchdown dependency. If I'm spending money on a guy for the waiver wires, I'm off. I'm very, very far off on Gio Bernard. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys, like if you're a ballsy gambler and just want to put him in your lineup just because you don't have any other options, I mean, then go for it. But Fournette's the dominant guy in this backfield over the past few weeks. He's got a 62% snap share. And I mean, I would take that any day over a 23% snap share. And Fournette will score the touchdowns. And even if he doesn't, he can catch passes as well. So there's far more upside with Fournette than there is Gio. And I mean, you're just rolling the dice on Gio. And I especially don't want to spend FAAB on him.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of snapped shares either. But yeah, I'm out on Gio. And another guy that I'm out on is Stevenson, right? Even if I think Harris is going to play. But even if Harris is out, the Cowboys are going to be up in this game up against the Patriots. And Stevenson's never going to see the field because it's going to be a Brandon Bolden game. I told you guys last week to avoid Brandon Bolden, and Brandon Bolden went out and gave you nothing because this was not the week. This upcoming week up against the Cowboys, they should be dominating the Patriots, and this should be the week that you're rolling out Brandon Bolden, not Ramondre Stevenson, and not even Harris. Like, this is something where I am so far out on Ramondre Stevenson that if I had him, I would pay somebody to take him for me if I was not able to cut him somehow. So, yeah, I'm out on Stevenson. I do not think he has a good week coming up. And honestly, I don't really like the upcoming games following that. You know, how are you feeling about Ramondre Stevenson? Are you a Stevenson girl? Are you out on Stevenson? What are you thinking?
No, and I don't think that Harris is even going to miss this game. Even after he suffered that injury, he came back in for a few snaps, went back out. I think that the Patriots were playing that injury safe just until they got more tests and more information. And that's why they relied on Stevenson against the Texans. This game's going to be a lot more difficult against Dallas. And like we kind of talked about before, I think it's going to be the Hunter Henry show or the Jonnu show. They're going to attack those safeties more than they are the line. And Stevenson only had a 34% snap share, even with Harris banged up. And Brandon Bolden actually outsnapped both of them at 38%. So if there's anyone and Harris is limited, I think Brandon Bolden's going to get the majority of the snaps. And he has that receiving upside as well.
Yeah, the Cowboys have one of the worst dose scores in the league. It's going to be a pass-heavy game. You're going to see Brandon Bolden actually get you some decent points this week. So, Brandon Bolden owners that listened to us last week, congratulations, because you weren't going to play him. I told you to pick him up after waivers process because nobody was going to go after him, and you waited 1 week, and now you're going to play him this week. Brandon Bolden's the guy. Now, Carlos Hyde, it pisses me off. Like, I don't know if you could see me yelling through this, but, I mean, people are telling me to tell people to pick up Carlos Hyde, and it's just nuts. Like, James Robinson is obviously the infinitely better back, and then people are coming in and saying, wait, like, he got 2 carries inside the 5-yard line.
And okay. What did he do with them?
First off, he didn't punch him in. But one of the reasons why he got a carry inside the 5-yard line is because it was immediately after James Robinson just had a 58-yard run. He needed to get some gas. Like, he needed to go over the sideline, catch his breath. So, of course, you're going to give it to your other running back. You're not going to force a guy who just had a 58-yard run, who also weighs, 220. Like, he's a bigger dude. Like, yeah, James Robinson needs to take a breath. Okay, so, yes, that running back will get an opportunity. But as we sit there and we look at Trevor Lawrence, right? Like, he's the main threat to anybody if there's a running back to own over there. And he's the quarterback, of course. He had, 7 carries, 8 carries, and 6 carries, I believe, over the past 3 games. And he's actually had 3 carries in the red zone, I believe, or inside the 5, over the past 2 games. They're starting to use them in the RPO more often. You don't want Carlos Hyde in this type of system. Like, And they're not even doing it. They're doing it in really weird situations. They're always like short-yardage situations that they're using the RPO in. So Trevor Lawrence is getting these, these 4-yard gains, these 3-yard gains, and nothing's really coming from them, which is also why I don't really love Trevor Lawrence, is because they're using him in these positions in third down. If they're doing it like first down, where he could go and gain 15, 20 yards, yeah, I would be more inept to grab him, or it would be a sexier fit, but that's not the case. It's always going to be these short yardage situations. Either way, we're back on Carlos Hyde. It just does not make any sense to me. He's done. Like, he's dust. He's not going to be fantasy relevant, and that's fine. Like, he'll be a very, very good backup. But let's just hypothetically say that James Robinson does get hurt. Like, people are like trying to turn it into like, oh, well, if he doesn't get the red zone touches, or if he doesn't get the touches inside the 5 like we saw last week, then I guess he's a good backup, or he's one of the best handcuffs. And I'm like, no, like, he's not. We've seen what he has to offer now. He is in his Frank Gore stage where he's going to get you 40 yards in a game off of 15 carries. And the Jaguars are going to be happy with that because they have nobody else. And if it comes to the point where James Robinson does get hurt, Dare Ogunbowale is going to be the third down back, while Carlos Hyde handles first and second downs on a team that is very pass heavy, with a quarterback that runs the RPO and keeps the ball on him every single RPO opportunity. So, with that being said, Carlos Hyde is a ginormous joke, and people need to get the fuck out of here when mentioning him as a waiver wire target. Cool.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And Darrell Bevel and Urban Meyer can't mesh in figuring out how they want to run this offense or this team. And part of those plays that they call are so obvious. They're such obvious reads. And you're not going to get anything out of them. The part of the only reason why Lawrence is getting those rush plays is because he's scrambling out of these broken ass plays because the defense has read them before they even got out on the field. So yeah, I don't get this whatsoever.
All right, so let's go ahead and hit a question real quick. Justin Johnson wants to know, what can I get from Marv Jones, or do I ride it out with T-Law? All right, so T-Law's not been accurate, right? He's been missing opportunity after opportunity. He missed Marvin Jones on the left sideline early on in the game, where Marvin Jones had his guy beat by 1 yard. I'm not saying that was going to be a touchdown play, but Marvin Jones is getting open to an extent. He will see more attention probably from the starting corner, where DJ Chark was commanding the coverage on that one. So Marvin Jones will see a little bit less efficiency than probably what we've seen. But don't forget what Marvin Jones did last year, right? With Kenny Golladay going out. I mean, he was completely dominant. It just took him a minute to get on the same page with Jared Goff. I think it was like the fourth game of the season or so. I want to say it was Minnesota that set it all off. I could be wrong. I mean, this was over a year ago, but it took him a few games to actually get his wheels underneath him and to get on the same page. Once they were on the same page, I mean, he was a wide receiver 1 for like 6 or 7 weeks, almost in a row. Like, it was over the course of like 8 or 9 weeks. He was a wide receiver 1. Wait for Marvin Jones Jr. to put together a string of 2 or 3 good games before you actually go to try and move him, because right now is not the time. He's a wide receiver 1 over there. He should see some volumes. And although I hate the offense and I cannot stand Urban Meyer and the system that he calls, and having Laviska Shenault play the 4th most, I believe, snaps on offense this past week, I mean, it drove me insane.
And didn't get anything out of it.
It was crazy. It was crazy, especially after they showed a connection the week before that when Chark did get hurt. I mean, it blew my mind, like, that they were playing Tavon Austin and what's his name?
Jamal Agnew.
Yeah, that was crazy to me. But Marvin Jones Jr. was still on the field. But
That's
Marvin
the only
Jones
thing
Jr.
that worries
was still
me.
on the field. He was still out there, though. He was still getting targets. He was still seeing opportunities, and it wasn't a lot. It wasn't over the top. But I think that we could see Marvin Jones Jr. still break out. Wait till you actually see a string of games put together before you try and move him. Because right now, what are you going to get for him? Like, that's a great question, Justin. Like, what can you get for him? Like, maybe a Tony Pollard, like a handcuff type player. Like, yeah, I'm out on trying to trade him. Just hold on to him. And if he doesn't do anything, then guess what? You lost a player that you're probably going to end up dropping anyways, because that's the type of value that Marvin Jones Jr. is going to command right now. All right, we got one from Dustin, and then we'll hop over to wide receivers. 2 quarterback leagues. Fields isn't cutting it. Heineke and surprising Lawrence are available. Scoop up Lawrence. I'm going Heineke on this one. And, I think that the schedule's advantageous over the next 2 weeks. I don't know how in a 2 quarterback league both are available, but yeah, I'm probably going to scoop up Heineke and leave Fields on my bench, actually, you could probably pick up both and cut Fields and another player, to be honest, because Lawrence actually has an advantageous schedule in the second half of the year. He should be on the same page as his, wide receivers, hopefully, and they should be running him more advantageous situations.
My thing is just that with Fitzpatrick possibly coming back, we don't really know how long Heineke's going to be the starter. So just be cautious about picking up both and cutting Fields. Fields is still young. He's in a pretty shitty offensive situation that's probably going to take him a little while to develop in, more so than the other two. So just be aware of that and be cautious.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said pick up both, is because we don't know how long Heineke's going to be there. So while Lawrence is available and Heineke's there, like, Fields can be cut right now, in my opinion. Like, Matt Nagy just does not know how to call plays for this offense. It's just not working out. So I would cut Fields and pick up both. So that way, if Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting week 7, like they said he possibly could, you still have Lawrence that you can pivot over to. Actually, I think Lawrence has a bye week 7.
Well, he does. That's why I'm saying I don't know if I would cut Fields to pick up both.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, makes more sense. All right, let's go ahead and hop over to these wide receiver positions. And yeah, I'm going to start out with, my love to hate guy, and that's going to be Rashad Bateman, right? The injury to Watkins is all we needed to get everybody to hop over to Bateman, right? Oh, Bateman's the next big pickup. And this, my friends, is what we call a roster clog. This is a guy who is going to end up, or I should say a roster bomb, not even a roster clog. It could be a roster clog for part of it, but if you go out there and start Bateman and expect big things, that's not going to be the case. I think he has a decently difficult schedule moving up. And I mean, honestly, like, being a rookie, right, in his first game in his career, playing in an offense that is a somewhat complicated offense that does not target their wide receivers a whole ton, who also has wide receivers outside of Watkins that have been successful in this offense over the past couple of weeks, such as Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, and of course my baby Hollywood Brown. And then Mark Andrews, right? Like, they have other options in this offense to pass to. So although we're seeing a whole different version of Lamar Jackson that we've never seen before, which is an accurate quarterback, especially downfield. I mean, and it would be even crazier if Marquise Brown did actually catch those bombs in week, what was it, 3?
Week 3, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lamar Jackson is playing way, way better, but where is the value for Bateman, and when are you going to know when to play him? They've got a very difficult division. The Bengals are stepping it up big time. The Browns are playing decent defense in the secondary, and the Steelers, not so much. But they also have a difficult schedule outside of that. It's not like Rashad Bateman is a must start every single week. The only player on that offense outside of Lamar Jackson that is a must start is Marquise Brown, because he's beaten all different types of coverages. Mark Andrews, borderline, but Marquise Brown, undoubtedly the only must start skill position player outside of quarterback. I'm out on Bateman. I would much rather have him go to somebody's roster and them start him up, right? Get the engines revving on Rashad Bateman, let them feel the hype, and then let him put up a 3-point game and a 5-point game, because he's going to have a lot more of those than he has 15 to 20-point games. Get off Rashad Bateman. I don't want to hear any more about it. I am so far done with Rashad Bateman being an asset for redraft fantasy leagues. It drives me insane.
Yeah, and even though Lamar Jackson is averaging way more pass attempts than he ever has in his entire career, the Ravens are still only averaging 33.4 pass attempts per game. They're still just running the ball, running Lamar. Even if Bateman does get immediate snaps, they kind of said something early on this week about how they're going to manage his injury and how they were worried about it. Even if he does get out there, I think they'll keep him on a limited percent of snaps, because why do you need him out there when you've got Brown and Andrews? Like, you just don't.
Yeah. It's funny to sit there and watch the hype build. I cannot wait until he implodes everybody's rosters and gives them more down weeks than he gives them up weeks. All right, so you have James Washington up here, and this is a perfect timing because Hunter Hall comes in the chat. I told him to start Melvin Gordon over Claypool. Well, guess what? We did not know that Juju Smith-Schuster was going to get hurt. And I still stand by my process. But no, it was obviously a bad call. But this right here, I literally put James Washington LOL because I think it's funny. It's minimal upside, and he's dealing with a hamstring injury. I mean, if you're going after like a 569 type game, right? 5 catches for 50 yards. Sure, James Washington is the guy. But I mean, he put up, I think it's 5 for 69 is what he put up against Green Bay. I mean, that's not a good game up against a secondary that is completely beat up. Yes, sure, he's had his games over the years, but similar to how I feel about Rashad Bateman, he's going to give you way more down weeks than what he gives you for good weeks. It just doesn't make much sense to me to try and target a player in this offense with Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback. I mean, we talked about Ben Roethlisberger and how bad he's been. He had his best week of the season with 16 fantasy points in most leagues. I'm out on James Washington. I don't want that to be my quarterback. I'm out.
Yeah, this offense is going to run through Najee. Somebody dropped Claypool 2 weeks ago in one of my home leagues, and I scooped him up, which I'm glad that I did because he put up great numbers this week, but I just don't know how much longer he's going to. And it's going to be the Najee show. It just is.
All right, Roberts in the chat, he said, what you're saying is I should do whatever I can to get Mack and Wilson Jr. on your roster. And yes, I believe that's true. Now, I'm not saying go out and throw 80% of your FAAB on both those guys combined, but I think they will be worth good chunks. And although Marlon Mack is a gamble, I don't think that Jeff Wilson Jr. is. We've seen them try to strive and find the right guy to fit this system because Jeff Wilson's been hurt and Raheem Mostert's been hurt, but now Jeff comes back. And we've seen how valuable Jeff Wilson can be in this offense, and we know that Shanahan likes his guys. Elijah Mitchell is not going to be a threat to his volume. I think that he'll still see his 15 or so touches a game and get touches inside the 5, which are they're premium touches. Like, you can't replace those touches. And he knows how to get into the end zone. Jeff Wilson Jr. is my dude. I'm saying go get him. All right. As for the tight end position, we have Evan Engram, and my notes say, how many times does he have to hurt you before you remember what he did?
Do you really want to hurt me? That's how I feel with Evan Engram, like for real.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't get it. I don't know why you guys keep going out and playing him. Like, all he does is drop balls. It's insane to me.
And he doesn't get red zone targets.
Yeah.
It's both.
He doesn't do anything. He's completely useless. And he has this insane athletic, skill set with no hands. So you're talking about a guy that can do incredible things with the ball in his hands, but they don't try to get the ball in his hands. And when they do, he ends up dropping it. Like, this guy is competing with Kellen Winslow Jr. and Eric Ebron as some of the worst hands the NFL has ever seen at the tight end position. I'm out on Engram, and even if he does go out there and puts up, a couple games where he's actually worth the start, like, dude, we told you to pick up Dawson Knox already, right? Like, we've given you player after player after player, Max Williams, for example, to go out and grab. Like, you should have already gone out and grabbed one of these guys, and you wouldn't be hurting for an Evan Engram. Like, get out of here with that. I don't want to hear any kind of Evan Engram, he's the guy talk right now. Like, no on Evan Engram.
And we already said literally everyone on the Giants is hurt. So don't run your fantasy hopes through that offense.
Agreed. All right. David Njoku, you put him on here. Why'd you put him on here?
I have lots to say on David Njoku. So
I'm going to let you go. Go.
So he's coming off a monster game, so I really do see how he would be enticing. But there's a little bit of, what do you like to say, fool's gold in that stat line. He had 100% catch rate of all his targets, 21.29 yards per target, and 1 touchdown last week on only 64% of snaps.
That sounds like an Evan Engram, or that sounds like a Noah Fant game from 2020.
Yeah, Cleveland is not designed to sustain this type of offense. They rank 27th in the league in pass attempts per game at 29 pass attempts per game, and that's total. And think about how they utilize Kareem Hunt, right? To put this in context, if we're going on the average number of targets, that means Kareem Hunt is averaging 14.4% of all of those 29 targets per game. And that's going to a running back. You cannot put your hopes and dreams on David Njoku. I also don't like this matchup. The Cardinals are second best in the league against the tight end position. And it was an explosive game. It was great. Jarvis Landry is going to come back within the next couple of weeks. And then there's going to be even somebody else gobbling up the target share. There are way better tight ends out there to roster if you haven't already. Or if you haven't listened to us in the past couple weeks.
Well, all right. So Njoku's difficult for me, right? Because you have a hyper-athletic tight end who has given you weeks where you can actually play him. Like this is not just 1 week. This is his second week out of 5 so far this season where he gave you a decent, if not great, fantasy performance. Meanwhile, his snap share has been 59%, 59%, 62%, 67%, 64%. So he's seen the snap share that he needs. This offense doesn't pass a lot. And you're right, this matchup up against the Arizona Cardinals is brutal. Like you're talking about seeing Budda Baker, Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins. Like this is a very, very good secondary and linebacker core who is great up against the tight end position. So I get that one. Denver, you have Simmons after that. Pittsburgh, you have Fitzpatrick after that. That's tough, all right? Schedule gets a little bit easier as you go on. So this is why I went ahead and took him off of my you should definitely pick him up list. However, if he goes out and he performs up against Arizona, it's going to be difficult to get him. It's going to be very difficult. So I'm at the phase right now where I'm saying, hey, if it makes past waivers and I have a deep league and I want to find somebody that I can kind of stash on the tail end of my bench, like where I just have an open roster spot, that'll probably be a guy that I target because his upside is through the roof, right? He can actually give you, league winning weeks, right? Where he can perform at a very high end level and he can give you these 27 points. It's going to be tough to know when to play them, but it's still somewhat navigated. You can still navigate through and figure out when you can actually play them. I'm just sitting here and I'm looking at the schedule coming up and it's like, damn, okay, maybe I do want him on my bench, but you can't play him this week. And if he fails this week, you can't play him next week up against Denver. And if he fails the following week, you cannot play him up against the Steelers. Then you can start playing him after that, but it's going to be a little bit before you can actually roll him out on an every week basis if he does not perform this week. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into our last segment with the gems. We're going to sit here and we're going to discuss some of these players on the back ends who have very, very low roster percentages. And I'm going to start out with the quarterback position in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, you really didn't want to do anything with, right? You didn't want to touch him. He was gross. But he had a great performance last night. It was last night?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was last night.
Yeah, it was last night.
You have Houston, San Francisco, Tennessee, the Jets, Jacksonville. Buffalo's a little bit difficult. And then Tampa Bay and Houston again. Like Tampa Bay, you can throw all over them. Their secondary is completely depleted. It's like a desolate wasteland out there. Houston is obvious, like 2 weeks where you can play Houston. Hell yeah. San Francisco, I can understand how you wouldn't want to play him, but I'm still okay playing him up against San Francisco. Tennessee, probably one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. The Jets, they're talking about trading Marcus May now, their best defensive guy, or the best guy in the secondary, I should say. And then Jacksonville, who is absolutely horrendous over there. Dude, Carson Wentz is a must stream in all leagues. Like we were talking about Heinicke, right? We're talking about Trevor Lawrence. I would pick up Carson Wentz over all those guys. And he has way lower roster percentages than both Heinicke and Lawrence. Are you smashing that add button for Carson Wentz? Or are you staying away from him?
I think Heinicke has a higher upside in the next couple of weeks. But with his rostership being so low, I don't think people are going to go out and grab Wentz. So if he does stay on waivers, these next 2 weeks that you stream Heinicke, then I would go out and grab Wentz. I wouldn't necessarily keep a bench spot for him just to get ready for these matchups. But
Houston this week, there's no way he's going to make it past waivers up against Houston. There's no way.
I don't know. I'm feeling more of a Jonathan Taylor game against Houston, and I like Heinicke's upside more. That's just my personal opinion. It depends on who you have on your roster and who's available in your league. I guess, use that as a tiebreaker.
All right, let's go ahead and jump on to your pick, Jameis Winston.
Yeah, so we've kind of talked about this. I know this sounds really weird. We've talked about getting ahead of the Week 7 bye monster a lot on this show. And that's why he's a gem for me, because I think it's going to be the wild, wild west on waivers next week. you've got the Bills, the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Steelers. So 4 out of those 6 teams, you've got viable, mostly top 10 quarterbacks. Get ahead of it this week, and I'll tell you why. So in week 5, Winston threw for a season high number of attempts. I know that really doesn't say much because New Orleans is a league low in passing attempts, but it's also a little bit comforting, I guess, because it looks like Sean Payton is getting more diverse with his play calling. Jameis should also probably get Michael Thomas back in week 7 after the bye, and they're facing Seattle. Seattle is terrible against the pass. And then he faces Tampa. He faces Atlanta. He faces Tennessee, and he faces Philadelphia. It's a soft matchup going down. And I wrote, buy your Christmas presents before Black Friday so you don't have to contend with the crowds. Because week 7 is going to be so brutal trying to either outbid or use your waiver priority or whatever to get this quarterback when all of your top 10 starters are out. So just think ahead a little bit, and reach for Winston.
Yeah, I mean, the Wild Wild West, you described it perfectly. I like that. We're going to stick with that one, of course. And I'm going to go with Brandon Bolden at running back. Actually, you know what? Let me start out with Jarrett McKinnon, and then we'll hit up Brandon Bolden. Jarrett McKinnon, the Washington football team, is allowing 23.2 points to the running back in the air over the past 3 weeks. And that's per game, by the way. 23.2 points in the air up against pass-catching running backs. That's insane. McKinnon might be my favorite week 6 sleeper. Like, this guy could absolutely. He ranked in week 5, which is only 2 less than Darrell Williams, his teammate, and that's 13th most in the NFL for the running back position. I mean, yeah, they might not be down as much up against Washington, but the Washington, I believe they have they have the second worst dose score, dump off containment efficiency score, at 4.23. I mean, that's brutal. They've played 7 pass catching running backs who have graded out at an 8.7 with a filtered score of 8 or 0.8. Meanwhile, they've given up 14.6 points, on the season as a whole. Like I talked about, 23.2 averaging out over the past 3. I mean, it should be wheels up for Jerick McKinnon. If you're in best ball leagues and you draft him, you're going to be stoked this week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out for at least a few weeks minimum, and this injury could end up getting complicated. So as for Jerick McKinnon, like, he doesn't just offer upside this week, but for future weeks to come. Let's see if Patrick Mahomes actually passes him the ball, though, because we haven't seen that out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, but we talked a little bit about it earlier. I think this game's actually going to be a really big shootout because the Chiefs and Washington are literally the 1 and 2 worst against the quarterback. So I think they're going to have to be forced to pass just to keep up. And that really bodes well for pass catching backs like McKinnon. So yep. I'm all in over it.
Well, Brandon Bolden's another one, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
Like, a lot of people are going to drop Brandon Bolden, right? He's going to be waiver wire trash by the end of the week. I've already seen people trash him. I'm like, this is not the week to trash him. You picked him up last week after the waivers process, so that way you could end up playing him this week. And this is the week that it's going to end up happening. So keep an eye out for your leagues, whether they are dropping Brandon Bolden. If he does get dropped, pick him up, because up against Cowboys, who I believe have the 4th worst dose score. Let me double check this. Yep, it's 4th worst. They have a 3.83 dose score, dump off containment efficiency score. And although they've actually played some pretty good pass catching running backs, they've faced 8 on the year who scored out of 10.2. That's a filtered score of 0.78. They're still allowing 12.4 points to the position in the air. I love Brandon Bolden moving forward. It's a smash play for me. Dallas is the perfect team to play pass catching running backs against.
Yeah, I agree. I'm actually kind of excited for this as a Dallas fan. I want to see how it goes.
All right. We've already talked about Jeff Wilson Jr. enough. Like, he's coming back on IR. Shanahan loves his guys. I don't want to cover it too much more, but David Johnson, it might not seem like, David Johnson's actually the guy for the Texans, right? Like, we've seen Mark Engram get his carries and stuff. We've seen it. But David Johnson has actually dominated the snap counts for the past 4 weeks, I believe. Yeah, 4 of the 5 weeks he's dominated snap counts. Week 1, it was Mark Ingram. After that, it's been David Johnson's season. Now, Mark Ingram did see some snaps this past week towards the tail end of the game, but David Johnson is still up there. Now, the thing that sucks with David Johnson is he hasn't been targeted a lot. In weeks 1 through 4, he was only targeted on 16.7% of the routes, weeks 1 through 4. This past week, he was targeted on 27% of the routes, and he looked good with it. Like, he looked pretty damn good. I think he had, 5 or 6 receptions for over 40 yards. Like, he was getting the ball in his hands, and he looked like what I expected him to look like, which was somebody that's good in space. He's a good pass catcher. David Johnson should see plenty of opportunities, in the upcoming weeks in the passing game. The Texans are not going to be good. This was a one-time thing with Davis Mills where, hey, you know what? Like, freakier things have happened. He had a really lucky catch going to the outside to, I don't even remember his name. I think it's Chris Moore. Yeah, Chris Moore. That was like insane. Like, that doesn't happen, right? Like, it's okay. Like, cool. Not going to happen every single week. They're going to need to utilize David Johnson. But I also think that there's a chance. Ready? I didn't put this in the notes. So you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I think there's a chance that David Johnson actually gets traded. Now, they've already gotten the usage out of him, and if they trade him, they're only going to see some dead cap space for half the year. Now, it is almost a sole contract, and I think they might actually lose money by cutting him versus just letting him play out until the next year. But I still think that there's an opportunity where the Texans say, hey, we need depth. Our entire team is depleted, and although we brought in like 72 free agents this past year, and half of them didn't even make the team, like, we still need depth. We need draft picks, and David Johnson is a perfect guy to go to a veteran team and be that pass-catching running back. We could see it from the Chiefs. We could see it from a team that hasn't sustained that injury yet. But David Johnson is still an efficient player when he gets the opportunity in space. He's not good at running the ball between the tackles. He's not good at running his head into a wall, which is why I thought this would be a great year for him. He hasn't seen that opportunity yet. I think he sees that opportunity moving forward. David Johnson is one of my waiver wire steals on the back end of rosters for week 6. You want to take a shot at somebody?
I want to talk about Zach Ertz. I'm really glad that you put him on the show sheet because I was going to talk about him. Dallas Goedert was placed on the reserve COVID list this week.
I didn't even realize that when I put him on the sheet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My brain's been going all day long with who to put on, and then he was there. So I was really glad that you did it. He's got the targets in the past few weeks. What do you have? 7, 8, and 6 targets over the past 3 weeks. And it's just Jalen Hurts isn't exactly the most accurate quarterback. But like we've just been hammering home, there's 7 possible starting tight ends on bye for week 7.
Yes, that's why I put it down.
Like get your people now before the wild west happens, because it's going to be brutal out here, like Olivia Rodrigo style. It's brutal out here. Think a week ahead and get your replacements now so that you are not screwed when you get either outbid, and don't waste your FAAB. You don't have to waste your FAAB on Zach Ertz this week because you're getting him a week early. So also you could, with Goddard being placed on the COVID list, he could even replace like Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, any of those other week 6. So you could have several weeks where he's a viable tight end to plug and play. So
it's almost like a good thing that Jalen Hurts hasn't been accurate, because I mean, what did he have? Like 1 or 2 receptions after seeing 6 targets this past week. He had a handful of receptions after seeing 8 targets, a handful of receptions after seeing 7. Like, we're actually seeing him be utilized in this offense, but they haven't been accurate. So guess what? Zach Ertz hasn't been performing. So he's almost flying under the radar for a guy that's still getting that volume. I think that Jalen Hurts can't get any worse than what he already is. So minimum-wise, you're still getting targets. Maybe he has some luck come his way. Maybe he starts seeing some more targets inside the red zone. But Zach Ertz, for me, is somebody that I'm hammering if I need a backup tight end because I have a bye week coming up. I think that Zach Ertz is going to be relevant, no doubt. All right, you have Donald Parham. Give me your thoughts on Donald Parham.
So he's my last like super sneaky gem sleeper. We all know that the tight end position is kind of messy, but he scored a touchdown in back-to-back weeks, and he's running 53% of the snaps. I think Jared Cook's running like 67. So Jared Cook really isn't out snapping him that much. In case you don't know his metrics, Donald Parham is 6'8". He's a giant. He's a giant. And he's on an extremely high-powered offense. After the bye in week 7, the Chargers face matchups with New England, Philadelphia, Minnesota. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for this dude to score. If you have the bench spot to stash him for those upcoming bye weeks, because the bye weeks, 7's brutal, but there's still quite a few going forward. I mean, I love it. I love him as a stash plug and play option.
Yeah, and I mean, he actually is a good player. He's so much fun to watch in the XFL. I have him in a lot of different spots, so I'm completely supportive of this decision. It's something where you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to be patient. But these bye weeks, man, to find good tight end, it's like impossible. So get the guys on your roster first. Now, Hunter Hall, we brought up Marlon Mack and how he was one of my favorite like sneaky plays. But actually, he was like a no shit like candidate for me. Like he's somebody that I think is going to absolutely see plenty of opportunities. I think that he's going to get traded to somebody like the Chiefs. Now the Giants are in play, which we're hoping probably not the Giants, but I mean the Chiefs are still a relevant candidate. And I mean we're seeing the Saints have issues with their running back situation with Tony Jones. He's out. I believe he's on IR ? But he's at least out. I mean.
He is.
Yeah, so we're seeing certain teams that are going to step up and need it. So at worst, he's a really, really good handcuff, and he's not going to be the third running back on his team. It's just a matter of time of when one of those teams actually feel like he's good enough and he's ready enough to actually take over a main role and not have to worry about the Achilles injury, which, I mean, he showed we shouldn't be worrying about it this past week. All right, so let's go ahead and close this out. Britt, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Britt_Flynn. I write for fightingchancefantasy.com. And in addition to this show, I do the Calm Before the Storm podcast with Kevin Tompkins and Gary Haddow every Sunday morning at 11 Eastern.
Very nice, very nice. And you guys can go check out all of our content over there at fantasyintervention.com, including the DOSE score, DOCE, dump off containment efficiency. It's taken off. And this past week, we gauged the best 10 teams up against the running back and the 10 worst teams up against the running back. And it was extremely accurate. The only person that we actually missed on was Darrell Henderson, who got hurt mid-game and didn't see a target. It gauges your ability to, or I should say the team's ability to defend up against the running back and the dump offs and the screenplays and everything like that. So it's been extremely accurate. We hit big time on who was it? Myles Gaskin was a massive hit. That was a huge success. AJ Dillon was a huge success. So go check it out. It's fantasyintervention.com/DOCE, DOCE, dump off containment metrics. So yeah, I'm excited to roll this out, and I'm excited for our next show. If you guys go to youtube.com/fantasyintervention, you guys can go check us out on the Washington Intervention Show, which is starting right now. So I got to run. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.